Welcome to the Known Victory Church YouTube channel. We are so glad that you found us today. We exist to make Jesus known and to be a place that anyone can call home. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, like, and share these messages so we can truly make Jesus known in our homes, cities, and across the world. We pray that this message impacts you and helps you to grow closer to Jesus.
I think today's a kind of a special Sunday because I think it's going to be, as I've been thinking and praying about this, kind of a launch for us, I hope, as a church when it comes to this whole area of evangelism. I think it's an area that the church, I find, oftentimes struggles with. And by the church, I mean oftentimes us as individuals. One of the hardest things, I think, for us to do is actually share our faith. You ever have a hard time sometimes sharing your faith? It can be challenging. We don't even know where to begin oftentimes when it comes to actually sharing our faith. And we know the first part of the mission of our church is what? Is to make Jesus known. The first part of our mission is evangelism, is sharing the good news and the love of Jesus to make him known and make him famous in our city and in our community and in our families, to make Jesus known. And this is evangelism. It's the sharing of our faith. Again, making him famous in their city and making him famous in the small and in this theater. But again, with evangelism, I think oftentimes we don't know where to begin. Like, where do we start when it comes to evangelism? How do I begin to talk to those who don't know Jesus about Jesus? I think it's this question that oftentimes comes in our minds, is this area of evangelism. Sharing of our faith with those who don't believe. And the truth is, we will become like those we spend the most time with and those we spend the most time studying. And if you want to become an artist, a great artist, you might want to study some of the great artists that have come before us. We can think of Leonardo da Vinci or Picasso or Van Gogh, some of these incredible artists that lived before us. Right? If you want to become a good athlete, you might look to Connor McDavid or LeBron James or Messi, or even if in the WNBA, if you watch WNBA, you probably don't. Caitlin Clark, one of the best female basketball players in the world. If we want to become better athletes, we want to study those who have done well before us. Maybe you want to become a better cook. If you want to become a better cook, you want to spend more time with me. You're like, I don't know if that's true or not. Beth does most of our cooking, okay? I was literally telling someone this morning, I've been praying about getting into smoking meat, which I think is just kind of like a classic, like you're getting old as a man thing to do, to just start smoking meat. It's just what it seems like. And so I'm like, it's about time, It's about time for me to start getting into this area of smoking meat. But if you want to become a good cook, you want to study and be around those who are good cooks and good chefs and those who make incredible food. If you want to become a better writer, you might want to look to C.S. Lewis or Mark Twain or William Shakespeare, some of the greatest writers that lived before us. But I think if we want to become better at sharing our faith, the best person to look to is Jesus. The best person to look to when it comes to sharing of our faith is Jesus. I think Jesus was the best evangelist. So if we want to learn and become better at sharing our faith, we need to look to the one who mastered it in his life. See how he lived out his faith, how he shared his faith, how he transformed the world. See, Jesus, if you Google the most famous people to ever live, Jesus tops almost every single list. I don't know if you knew this. The most influential people to ever live, Jesus is almost always near the very top of that list. The most influential people to ever live. And so for us who follow Jesus, our job and our goal is to become more like him. So that way we can actually become people of influence in our communities and become people of influence at work and people of influence, not influencing people to go any which way except for towards Jesus himself. That our entire lives should be dedicated to becoming more like him so people can see him in our everyday lives. This is the man who conquered death and changed the world from the inside out, who changed the attitudes of many, a man who did miracles, who raised people from the dead. But he also encouraged a woman at a well. A man who taught the multitudes, but healed a child in the quiet. A man who changed the way that we think and creates something new inside of us. We need to get better at sharing our faith. I think we can all agree to that. I know I can agree to that in my own life, that sharing my faith needs to become a bigger part of what I do. To get better at sharing it. I think one of the biggest calls of the local church, of course, is to reach the lost and help them find a home in the body of Christ. to find a community to belong to become more like Jesus. And we all know the Great Commission. We talk about it all the time. I share about it. It seems like very frequently the Great Commission laid out by Jesus to go into all the world. But we also know how hard it is to actually live that piece of it out, to go into the world. And there's some things that I think Jesus mastered when it came to evangelism, some things that he mastered that I think we can learn from, that we can grow in ourselves to become more like Jesus and hopefully start to see more and more people come to know him because of what we're doing in our own lives. So we're going to begin the story, just going to read one verse. It comes from Luke chapter 15, verse 1 to 2, and it starts in this fascinating way. It says this: tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. It's a very interesting verse to start this whole story. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. How many of y'all know that's not often what we see in today's society? In fact, it seems that oftentimes the notorious sinners, the worst of the worst, are trying to stay as far away from the church as they can. It seems that way in our culture, and I think maybe we've lost a piece of this when it comes to the church, that the notorious sinners, the tax collectors, the ones that no one liked, and the ones that didn't belong, the ones that you weren't supposed to associate with, guess what? They wanted to associate with Jesus. They wanted to be around him. He had something that was different than what they were used to. They had something. The tax collectors who were often hated by the Jewish people, and the notorious sinners, not just the sinners, but the notorious ones. The ones you hear about on the news, the ones who have the wanted poster up in the saloon, those kind of people, the notorious sinners. And I think the first way that Jesus mastered evangelism, do you know what I think it is? I think Jesus was approachable. See, people were drawn to Jesus. People liked to be around him. And not the religious people. If you read through, a lot of the time the religious people actually didn't really want much to do with Jesus, but the notorious sinners and tax collectors, they wanted to be around Jesus. They wanted to hear him teach. They wanted to be around him. He wasn't hiding in the green room, right? He wasn't running out after he gave the message. He wasn't trying to just clock in and clock out so he could get home and get some rest. He was approachable. And he was with the people. He had this genuine love for people, that people were so drawn to him. But I don't think that they were just drawn to Jesus. I think Jesus was also drawn to them. That Jesus was drawn to the broken and hurting, the notorious sinners, the tax collectors. Jesus, this is who he hung out with. Most of the time we read through scriptures, he's with the broken people in culture that people had marginalized, that they had pushed to the side. He had this deep love for people. The mission of Jesus is laid out in Luke chapter 19. It says this: for the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. The mission of Jesus. The Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. To be around them, to find them, to go where they are and not hide. And this verse, if you know it, it comes from the story of Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus is that wee little man who's a notable sinner, a notable tax collector, not very well liked. And he wasn't just the tax collector, he was the chief. He was the boss, he was the CEO of the tax collectors. If you don't like something, you probably don't like their boss even more, And that's who he was. So he climbs up this tree to try and see Jesus. And Jesus notices him in the crowd and says, come down from the tree. And he basically says, I'm coming to your house for dinner. And Zacchaeus, he chooses to pay back everyone he's cheated 4 times. It's this remarkable story. But this is the mission of Jesus. Right? He finds this man in the middle of a crowd, a notorious tax collector, the chief of them all. And he says, come down from that tree. Let's have relationship with one another. I think there's 2 extremes when it comes to our faith. I think there's those who follow Jesus, but you would never be able to tell. Because of how they talk, how they act, how they live their lives. They're so consumed by the world and trying to be like the world that they lose their message. They act and they talk and they think and they live like the world. So what happens is that they have an audience. The audience is there, but guess what they don't have? They've lost the message. They have the audience. The people are there. They have the ability to be around the people, but they've lost their message because how they're living their life goes contrary to what Scripture teaches us. I think that's one of the extremes. But I think the other extreme is those who aren't in the world at all. They're in the Christian bubble, as sometimes it's called. Everyone they know goes to church. Everyone they work with goes to church. They don't do anything to get around unchurched people, those who don't know Jesus yet. You know, my pastor, Dave Myers, you know what he used to call them? He used to call them gopher Christians. He said what they used to do is they'd stick their head out of the hole to make sure it's safe to come out, make sure that there's no notorious sinners around, to make sure that everything's safe around them. They stick their head out of the hole to make sure there's no unbelievers around, there's no sin going on, there's no brokenness around. And the truth about them, do you know what? They have a message. They have the message, but there's no audience. When it comes to following Jesus, we have to be in this place where we're willing to go to the broken parts of the world and share Jesus, but not lose our message. To not be transformed by the world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind, which is the gift from Jesus. That when we're going to share the gospel, we have to be so much like Jesus, but we also have to be in a place where people actually have the opportunity to actually come and have conversation and relationship with us. That we're not scared of the world. We're not scared of the sin. We're not scared of what's going on in their life. We're actually drawn to them because we know Jesus and God wants to bring them to be a part of the family. I think when it comes to us, we have to think about our own lives when it comes to those around us. Neither of these groups of people are approachable. Again, one has lost their message and the other has lost their audience. We have to have the message and also have the audience. We can't lose our saltiness, but we have to share the love of Jesus to people, and they have to feel like they can actually approach us and have a relationship with us. They can feel comfortable around us. They can feel loved and they can be accepted. But we don't lose our message. The beautiful message of Jesus. The greatest news we ever received. And the truth is, I think one of the biggest things we need to do is we need to pray that we'll have a heart for those people. That we'll have a heart for the broken. We'll have a heart for the notorious sinners. That we'll have a heart for those people. That we'll want to be around us to hear our stories and hear about Jesus, but also that we want to hear their stories. We want to learn from them. We want to hear what's going on in their life. We need to pray for God's heart for them. That's the first way Jesus lived his life as an evangelist. He was approachable, but the next one is this: he was relational. Jesus was relational. And do you know what the truth is about Jesus' relationships with the notorious sinners and tax collectors? Is the religious leaders and Pharisees did not like this one bit. In fact, it made them very angry. You see it story after story, moment after moment. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, are always so angry with Jesus. Why? Because he's with the broken and sinners, the notorious people. We can see this in the next verse of the story we're going through. Luke chapter 15, verse 2 says this: "This made the Pharisees and teachers of the law complain that he was associating with such sinful people and even eating with them. How dare he?" This is their minds. How dare Jesus be around the most broken people, the notorious sinners, the tax collectors? How dare Jesus be with them? Does he know what the law says? Does he know the truth? They didn't like that these people would show up to their events. And they didn't just not like that they would show up and Jesus would talk to them. They also didn't like that he actually associated with them and had conversations with them and was relational with them. They did not like this at all. In fact, in Luke chapter 15, too, but in the New King James Version, this is what it says. It says, "And the Pharisees and scribes complained, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.'" He uses this word receives. And this word receives in the original language, it meant welcome warmly and to invite closer into relationship with. It wasn't just like a handshake at church when like, "Hey, how are you today? God bless you, sir," and then you move on. It was an actual conversation, actual relationship, drawing them to have close relationship with him. And we see this with Jesus and his disciples. Some of the disciples that Jesus called would have not been chosen by many other rabbis. And in fact, a lot of them weren't. He has a tax collector as one of his closest allies. One of his disciples is this tax collector. It's this invitation. Jesus was inviting them into relationship with himself. See, the sinners and tax collectors, they wanted to be around Jesus. But again, I think it's because Jesus also wanted to be around them. I think we can picture Jesus at these events, talking with people, sitting with people, engaging with people, asking questions of people. And he ate with them. He would begin to learn about them and hear their stories. And again, eating with them would have been an absolute breach of how Pharisees and rabbis should interact with notorious sinners. They would have been shocked not only to see him engaging with them, but eating with them as well. That oftentimes their job was to show up, give the word, give the encouragement, and then leave, not actually engage with the people. As followers of Jesus, our job is to engage with the broken people of this world. They need Jesus. They need what we have. And we can't be afraid. We want to have a relationship. We need to want to have a relationship with them because Jesus is so head over heels in love with the broken and hurting people in our world. And we have to have that same love and compassion that he shows and that he showed them. See, again, the Pharisees were offended they would do such things. You know what might happen is if you start having relationships with those people that might not be a part of church, they might not know Jesus, they might be different than you, but they might act different, they may talk different, they may think different than you. There might be some people in the church like, why are you associating with these people? There might be people in the church who say, why are you having conversation with them? Why are you inviting them over to your home for dinner? Do you know who they are? These conversations happen. But there's this idea for some people that, you know, there's certain people we cannot associate with, we cannot have a relationship with. Again, you would think the notorious sinners would try and run away from Jesus. You think they would do whatever they could to get out of the meeting. You know, maybe they do. Maybe they think they try and do whatever it took to get out of church. I'm tired. I'm busy. I have a trip. I have another thing. My kids don't want to go. I went to bed too late. All these excuses that come up. Yet the notorious sinners were always showing up to these meetings. You know, I think sometimes it's hard for us, even as those who go to church, to be showing up to all the things that go on. I know it can be hard. But it says these notorious sinners wanted to be around him. They wanted to hear him share about the love of God and share about the kingdom and share about what was going on. We need to get God's heart for the lost. We need to be willing to invite them into our story, invite them into our homes, and invite them into our church. You know, they say, and maybe this is similar for you, they say that most people come to faith based off of a relationship that they already have. Most of the time, people will come to church because their neighbor invited them, or their friend invited them, or their coworker, or their boss, whatever. Those are the kind of relationships that end up expanding the kingdom. I know that's how it was for me. When I grew up in church, I grew up, so, you know, I was brought to church from a young age. But I had to make it real for myself. And when I met Beth, you know, she was stronger in her faith than I was. I was pretty weak in my faith. You know, the story is we met at a youth camp. It was a Victory youth camp called Boot Camp. And I'm not kidding you. I showed up to camp. I showed up to this camp hungover. I was 16. Showed up to this camp hungover when I met Beth. It's a true story. And that's when I met Beth. And my faith was not strong. And her faith was always stronger than mine. But I had to make a decision in my own life. And do you know what? A big piece of my relationship with Jesus is because my wife, at that time, wasn't even my girlfriend. I wasn't allowed to date her till I was 18. Always encouraged me to continue to grow in my faith. And encouraged me to go and go to Youth with a Mission in Los Angeles. She's the one who encouraged me to grow my faith. We all need people in our lives to expand and grow our faith. But it oftentimes starts with people we already know. Maybe our neighbors. So the question is, do we even know our neighbors' names? And you know what? I'm so bad at this. Beth knows our neighbors by name. She knows like what their dogs' names are. She knows like where they live and what car they drive. I'm like, I've seen them 3 times. I did this, you know? I was like, as men do. You know, we just give them the nod. That's it. That's a whole relationship. I'm not great at this. But this is how, if we want to see evangelism grow in our life, if we want to share our faith, it's going to be the people we already are close with. We don't have to go online and find some group to be a part of so we can start sharing Jesus. What about the people that we already have in our lives? There's this author and pastor, his name is Lee Strobel, and he wrote this in a book 30 years ago. The quote is this: non-Christians are hungry for close relationships, or close friendships. They desperately want a confidant who cares about them. They are in many ways seeking meaningful relationships, and yet they are less equipped to find them. You know, we're blessed to be able to be a part of a church where we care and love each other. this kind of operation, this kind of a group doesn't naturally happen. And I think it's getting worse and worse. This was written 30 years ago. I think it's getting worse and harder to find real meaningful friendships and relationships. This is why the church needs to be more than just a place to go, a place to worship. It has to be a place where we can find meaningful relationships and friendships. Because this is what the world is looking for. And it's not just the world. I think it's what we're looking for. This idea of connection and being together. And I think the last kind of step or the thing that Jesus did when he as a master of evangelism is that Jesus was intentional. You know, one thing Jesus loved to do was pray. He used to go away and pray. But do you know where Jesus never stayed was praying on the mountain? He didn't stay there for his 3 years of ministry. That would have been a little odd. Prayer is so important, and everything starts with prayer. As we can go next week into this series, everything starts with prayer, but guess what? We have to pray, but we also have to go and do something. We can't just stay in the prayer closet. It's a great place to be. Spend time in prayer. But you got to actually, the prayer equips us to go into the world and strengthen us and prepare us for what's going to come. We got to actually be intentional and go forward. He didn't just pray and just expect that people would come to him. He prayed and then went to them. He went to seek the lost. He turned his prayers into intentional action and pursuit of the notorious sinners and tax collectors. It is one thing to pray for those who are lost. It is one thing to pray for those we know that don't know Jesus yet. It is another to intentionally go and have a relationship with them. We can see it in the next part of the story. It's the famous parable. You might know this. Luke chapter 15, verse 3-7. So Jesus told them this story. If a man had 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, will he joyfully carry it home on his shoulders? When he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." In the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. This is intentional going. This is a story. The sinners and the tax collectors come to Jesus. The Pharisees are mad that he's praying with them, and he tells them this story. That it's about going and bringing in the lost. It's about going and bringing in the lost and broken people. And it's not the end of this story, because then he goes on. And he shares a story about a lady who loses a coin, and how she tears apart her house to find it. And then it goes into the story of the prodigal son, if you know this story. And this is how the story ends in Luke chapter 15, verse 20. So he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. This is the intentional going and intentional passion that we need, and it's this commitment to making Jesus known. The same heart that the father had for his son that was lost. The same as the shepherd who lost his sheep and goes and looks for it. He doesn't just sit in his pen and pray. He goes out and finds the sheep and carries it home. Committed to going into the world to seek the lost, because we know that lost sheep and lost coins and lost sons and lost daughters don't always find their way back home. And I think our job as the church, as individuals, is to go find the sheep and go find the coin and go find the sons and go find the daughters and bring them back home. Jesus was intentional. He went away to pray, and then he always went out to seek and save the lost. We need to do more than just pray. And again, we're going to be talking next week all about prayer. And this is one thing I love about our Saturday night group. If you don't know, we have a Saturday night group, and they just moved. They're meeting at the Love Edmonton Chapel now on Saturday nights here right in the mall. One of our church partners, and they're taking the gospel into the world. And I messaged Mike Stoff for him and his wife Kayla, and Jeff and Joanna, they run this group. And they message him, say, how's it going? I haven't been able to go yet because, Beth's working on Saturdays, and it's like right around the time where so I just can't make it on Saturdays. But he says this, he says, hey, things are going great. There's a lot of space, which is so nice, which is awesome because I know they've been struggling. They were meeting in Jeff and Joanna's house. He says, we've been able to minister to some of the regulars here at the chapel. And he said, we've seen God move powerfully in healing. He said, it definitely feels like a new level of the glory of God. It's this idea that to go into the world, again, we've talked about this so many times. Why we moved to this location is so we can go into the world. One thing I know is that even for my friends, sometimes it's easier to invite someone to a movie theater than it is to a church. There's some people I know that are saying, I'm never going to step foot in a church, ever. I will never do it. I have friends like that. But I know sometimes, inviting someone to come to the movie might be a little easier. But God is moving powerfully. God is moving in our midst, and God is moving because our church is going. This is the call to go and make Jesus known, to go into the world. That we don't have to be scared of the world, but we have to have a deep love for the world. This love that comes from the Father. This message is really just an introduction into the series that we're going to be going through over the next 5 weeks. And our prayer and our hope is that this series will equip all of us and help us create strategies in our own lives for sharing the gospel. To equip all of us, because I know how hard it is to share the love of Jesus. I know how hard it can be to tell someone your story, to tell someone about Jesus. I know it's not always easy, but it comes from this book. This is a book, it's called Bless. And it's 5 everyday ways to love your neighbor and change the world. This is a story, a series that my old church did after I left. And they were telling me about it, and it got me really excited because I know how hard this idea and this stuff can be in our own lives. My hope is that it will help each of us, again, have strategies that will help us make Jesus known in our own communities. And I hope that this will become a strategy even for our own church when it comes to seeking the lost. And so bless, this word bless, it's an acronym. And we have it that can come up right here. Number 1, begin with prayer. So we're going to talk about that next week. How everything we do, especially with evangelism, needs to start with prayer. Number 2 is listen. We need to get better at listening sometimes. That sometimes sharing the gospel is not just about preaching, but listening and hearing people's story. We need to get better at listening. The next one is eat. It's probably the best one. How much of Jesus' ministry took place around tables and eating meals together? Then one of the best things we can do is invite someone over to our home or invite someone out for dinner to have a conversation with them so they know that they're valuable and they belong and they're part of our lives. And the next one is this, is to serve them, always finding ways to serve them, ways that are actually meaningful to them. As we get to know them, as we invite them out for meals, it can be easier to serve those people. And the last part is this is story. It's the opportunity where we can share our story, the story of what God has done in our lives. And I think this can be a shift for all of us. If we can learn these things, to learn that in every relationship we have, it can become simple. And it's going to take time. It might not happen overnight. We always love the overnight success story. Sometimes things take years. Sometimes things take so long to develop and build. But I think it's all something we can grow in when it comes to evangelism. That as our church continues to seek the lost, as we continue to make Jesus known, my prayer is that we can have strategies and ways that we can equip ourselves to do it better. I want to end this morning. There's a story from this book that I wanted to read. It's just kind of, they call it a blessed story, But this is what it says. It says, a church in New Jersey developed a curriculum for the members to be trained in the blessed practices, it says. Rosa was a senior level manager at a national consulting firm in New York, and she was one of the first people to go through it. And since she had earned a great deal of respect at work, she chose to make that the focus of her efforts. See, Rosa began praying for her coworkers by name. From time to time, she would go to work early in the morning and do a sort of prayer walk through the offices of her building, praying for each coworker as she passed by their office or cubicle. She focused on being a better listener and being more open-ended, asking more open-ended questions during one-on-one meetings. Like, what do you like to do when you're not working? Or tell me more about your family. She was also more intentional about lunch breaks, asking God to give her opportunities to share meals with staffers who might need some encouragement or direction. One day, one of the people she was praying for and sharing lunches with started pinging Rosa with odd messages through the office's internal communication system. It was as if she wanted to talk about something, but she wasn't being clear. Finally, she wrote, "Rosa, I think I need to talk to you." Rosa quickly responded, "I'm here whenever you need me. Just let me know when you can come by my office." And a few hours later, there was a knock on her door that led to a series of conversations and eventually growing a friendship between Rosa and her coworker, and they began to study the Bible together. Rosa continued to serve her employees in such remarkable ways that senior executives took notice. Not only was her team working better together, but production was also improving. Her supervisors saw significant transformation, one they wanted to see replicated with other teams. The firm held regular town hall meetings, and Rosa was asked to share the secrets behind her leadership style and why she led the way she led and how others could apply similar practices. Her presentation was so well received that she was asked to share it with the highest leaders in the organization. And at the end, Rosa said, "By the way, all these principles are found in the life and person of Jesus." It's this idea that we can be better at sharing our faith in our workplace. We can be better at sharing our faith in our communities, in our homes, and the people we already know. And it doesn't have to be complicated, right? It doesn't have to be this complicated process. It can start by just praying and then moving forward. And our takeaway today is this, is to make Jesus known, we must follow his example by being approachable, relational, and intentional, actively seeking the lost with love and purpose. If we want to become better at evangelism, we need to be approachable, relational, and intentional, and be actively seeking the lost with love and with purpose. And I'm excited to go through this series. And again, our prayer is that it'll help all of us grow when it comes to sharing our faith and help us all grow when it comes to evangelism. So again, I know how hard it can be, but my prayer is that we can make it as simple as possible, so that way we can become masters of sharing the gospel as well. So I know that's one of our biggest desires as followers of Jesus, but one of the things we often don't even know how to do. So God, I thank you. And Jesus, we thank you that you are the greatest evangelist, and we can learn from you. We can learn how to share your love and share your compassion, and we can learn to be approachable. We can learn to be relational, and we can learn to be intentional about sharing your love with those we know and those around us. God, I pray that as we go through these conversations, as we learn more about how we can become better at sharing, God, I pray that you help all of us when it comes to this area to grow in our own faith so we can become better at sharing our faith. God, I thank you that we can be people who are going to learn how to be better evangelists and better sharers of the gospel. In Jesus' name, amen.